Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. In this video, I'm going to talk about why it is important to understand the economy for yourself. The reason why it is important to understand the economy for yourself is because there is no economy like the one that you are living. No matter how much we want to blame political or social environment, you have made the decisions that have led you to where you are today, and you have to think about that. Your economy is now very different from what it is that maybe somebody who is your best friend, who you grew up with, and you wonder why it is that they have the life that they live and you have the life that you do, and you think to yourself, man, we both had the same economy that we grew up in. How come they are doing so much better than I am? Because your economy is different from their economy. Right? And this is something that I think a lot of people really need to take into consideration, and that everything that we are experiencing out there is our interaction with everybody else, and that interaction, those transactions, is the economy. When you hear about politicians or the corporate media or anybody else talking about a good economy or a bad economy, what they're talking about is the amount of transactions that are taking place out there. That's it. I mean, think about that, right? How many transactions are taking place, and how well you are participating within those amount of transactions. Because if there is a lot of transactions happening out there, then you can participate in business or labor or products or whatever if there's a lot happening out there, right? But if that begins to slow down the amount of transactions that are happening, then you will not be able to participate within that, economic environment, and you're going to start seeing yourself, slowly start to fall into more debt, maybe even, bankruptcies. Things are bad, and you're saying, man, it's a bad economy out there. No, you have positioned yourself in a way that is now deteriorating your life, and you have to think about that. That is different from what somebody else has done, right? So it's not the economy that has done it. It's your interaction with the economy. It's your dependency on how many transactions are going to take place. See, I think, for example, and I don't mean to use like my friends as an example, but I think this is a really good story that kind of describes what's happened, right? For a lot of people out there, when they look at the economy, right? They look at the amount of business that they had done in their life, right? They see how much that they have been able to earn. They know how to duplicate that effort, right? They know that by doing certain things that a certain outcome is gonna come from that, right? And so when you have this kind of mindset that you are going to be able to do something and be able to provide for yourself in the future with this particular effort that you have done, then it becomes the way of life for you. You think this is it. There's no other options really going on, or you don't even really think of the other options because you're focused in on this, right? Now, I know, just kind of stick with me. I know I'm kind of going out there a little bit. But what ends up happening is that you have built a life around that idea, right? But then if something happens within your business, within your job, within some reason that the money begins to fluctuate, whether it goes up or down, it begins to alter the way of life that you have set up. And now this is really where it gets critical, because if you can no longer maintain that, then you have the disruptions of life, right? This is where you start falling into bankruptcy or, whatever, problems that start to, come from it. You have to start selling off your stuff or whatever, right? Now, you may have been able to position yourself in which that may not have happened, but you didn't consider that you wouldn't be able to have the income. Right? Because you had it all coming in, it was easy flowing, there was a lot of transactions, there was no problem with it. When it started getting into a position in which that things were becoming difficult, instead of rearranging your life in order to deal with the possibilities of this difficult time, you tried to maintain it, right? And now all of a sudden you are facing some hardship, right? Now, instead of adapting to the economy, right, because this is your economy and the way you have set it up, right? Instead of adapting to it, now it's going to be looking for blame on why it is that you no longer have this. You guys following me here? This is why it's important to understand the economy for yourself. See, now, when you're in good times and you think, man, things are really flowing, I'm really doing well at business, I got a lot going on, right? If you take your personal life and you elevate it up on that, which is what almost everybody does because you want to enjoy that money, You want to enjoy the new money. I mean, everybody does, right? You want to take better vacations, drive nicer cars, wear nicer clothes, eat better food. Everything starts to elevate because you have the new money coming in. Right? Your economy, your interaction with the economy has now elevated your life. You didn't have to do that. You could have kept it down, right? And interacted with the economy in a way that says, I'm not going to elevate my life. It's going to be very difficult for me to do that. I have to have a lot of discipline to make this happen. But in order to maintain future expectations of being able to, maintain this particular life, I can't elevate it, right? Because then I have to maintain that. So I can maintain this even though the money's coming in. That right there, that little superpower that people may have or may not have, is their interaction with the economy that then deteriorates it or advances it. So when you come into bad economic times and you start to lose that money income because you're not able to do as many transactions, you're like, whoo, I'm back to what I normally was making before we had this big, run up in stimulus package or lowering of interest rates or whatever it was that, stimulated the economy and got a lot of transactions to begin to take place. As that begins to diminish, you have positioned yourself in which that it doesn't really hurt you or even really affect you, right? You may have less income. You may have to cut back on some of the times you have eaten out or something like that, but it doesn't really dramatically impact your life. Now, had you purchased a car, right, you'd be dependent on that. You can make a decision at some point in your life that says, man, I own this car, right? I own it outright. If I sell it, what do I do, right? If I sell this car, I don't know if I'm going to have income coming. I have a very valuable car. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be, a really fancy watch or something, right? But when you do that and you sell that off there, right, and you're thinking, okay, now I have this money. How is it that I am now going to interact with all the transactions that are out there in order to make sure that I can maintain my life? And if you start taking that money and you just start living your life like you normally did, right, eventually it's gone. But if you take that money and you decide, nope, I got to hold on to this. I have to now cut back on everything I have. I have to hold on to as much of this as I possibly can until I can figure out how it is that I'm going to interact with the economy again, with, that my economy starts to interact with with or without the amount of transactions that are happening out there. Make sure I say this right. In order for me to maintain the style of life that I have today, okay, while holding on to this. So difficult. This is a very difficult task. And so I know this is really weird and kind of out there when I kind of talk about this stuff, but I think a lot of people might hear this and start to begin to understand on why it is that they are so frustrated with politics, why they are so frustrated with the social environment out there, why they are so frustrated with the idea that they're not going to be able to buy a house. I mean, you think about this right now. This is something that I took into consideration. And how it is that people are supposed to interact, right? If they lower interest rates, let's just assume they lower interest rates into the future, right? What is that going to do to the real estate prices that are out there, right? Already we are sitting in an economic environment in which that home prices are very elevated and very difficult for new people, or young people, I should say, new home buyers, to get into this market, to get in and purchase a home. If the economic environment is one of lower interest rates, what is that going to do? It's going to continue to push up real estate prices. It's going to continue to push up markets. It's going to continue to push up, all the things that we have seen in inflation, or inflate in price. They're going to continue to inflate in price. That's going to have the opposite effect of what it is that the Federal Reserve is going for, bringing inflation down. Right? Just the idea of the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates is now beginning to support the markets. I read an article talking about how real estate prices have increased in the month of October from the previous October or something like that. I forget. I'll leave a link down in the description to the article. But I'm thinking about this, and in the article they said this is based off of the idea that the Federal Reserve is done with their interest rate hikes. Right? I mean, there's never been an announcement that they are completely done, right? They've implied it pretty well that they are not going to be raising interest rates, but nowhere out there have they actually stated that they are going to lower them. It was a dot plot map with some of the Federal Reserve, and a lot of them, right, Federal Reserve members, who have said that, yes, we are going to lower interest rates going into the future, right? Well, that's a given. Interest rates have never stayed still. They either go up or down. But if they are going down, they're generally going down into bad economic times. What they are trying to do is lower interest rates to get more transactions to begin to take place. If you have positioned yourself in a way that says, I need transactions, I need more transactions to happen in order for me to conduct myself because I have positioned myself like that, then you are going to be running into difficult times, because this is what the Federal Reserve has positioned the economy or the transactions in the economy to do, and how you are participating with that. Right? Again, this is like, I know this is really backwards. I don't even know if I'm going to post this video now, because I just feel like I've just kind of talked in circles and just talked really, kind of in a way that seems like very confusing, but I don't know. To me, this makes the most sense, right? That when you look at things in a way that is just for yourself, right? This is one of the reasons why I just didn't believe that, the inflation scenario from the money printer. It was like, man, the things that I have read on my own says this was more about a supply chain breakdown. Even the Federal Reserve, who is the one who is in charge of monetary policy, not us, right? They're looking at the supply side for help. They were looking at the reestablishment of the supply chain to bring inflation down. They weren't looking at interest rate hikes, right? They knew that that would slow the consuming down, right? They knew that that would happen, but they were looking for help from the supply side of things. That was like one of the biggest things that I was watching. And it was just like, well, if you're looking for help from the supply side of things, then none of this interest rates, none of this unwinding of the balance sheet, none of that stuff really matters at this point. Right? The reestablishment of the supply chain is the bigger point. And then they will start to adjust their interest rates based off this idea that inflation is beginning to come down. Well, if that's all the case for me, I can step back and I can look at this and I can take it objectively and say it, right? That unless we run into bad economic times, which means that unemployment rises dramatically, okay? Because that would mean bad economic times for most people if they have no income, is what I'm assuming, right? Because it's really how you positioned yourself in this, right? But I would only assume that the Federal Reserve would then be forced to then adjust their monetary policy. Right now, it's about low and stable prices, which is being achieved with the higher interest rates, and unemployment isn't rising dramatically. Why would they adjust their interest rates? I don't understand. Like, people say they're going to do it. That would cause a lot of issues to begin to start to take place in the markets that they are not necessarily looking for. Like, if you're looking for stability, that's not really the way to do it. Causing housing prices to go exponentially higher, markets to go exponentially higher. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I just look at this thing backwards and differently, right? But to me, like, when I see what I see taking place, I know how to position myself. I know to go for the least amount of debt that I could possibly do, right? Keep my living expenses very low, and right now stack away a lot of cash, because I feel that if we come into liquidity issues coming into the future, which I do believe is going to come, because that would be the real issue that would cause the Federal Reserve to want to lower interest rates. And if we do run into liquidity issues, that means people are going to start selling off Bitcoin, selling off gold, selling off real estate, selling off their cars, selling off their Rolexes. Right? If you want to be in that position where you can buy those things, you got to be sitting on cash. But everybody had this belief that cash is trash, because that's all they heard on the media for the last 2 years. All right, I got to go. Uneducated economist, you let me know.